I'm the real daughter who was mistakenly switched at birth. First thing after I got back home, I gave my birth parents two choices. Give me $20,000 and cut all ties, I'll leave. Or send Linda away within a day. She goes, I stay. When my real parents found me, I was working odd jobs at my adoptive parents' restaurant. On my way to serve soup, someone bumped into my shoulder, and the hot soup spilled all over my thigh. The porcelain bowl hit the ground, shattering with a crash. My adoptive mom, who was snacking and watching TV at the counter, rushed over and slapped me. She cursed, "What did I do in my past life to deserve a jinx like you?" My face and leg burned, and just as she was about to slap me again, an outraged voice stopped her. "Stop. Who gave you the right to touch my daughter?" After the doctor treated my burn, my biological mom, Wendy, held my hand tightly. She started crying when she carried me to the hospital. My biological dad, Mike, stood nearby, constantly comforting her, looking at me with guilty eyes, occasionally handing her new tissues. Wendy sobbed, "It's all our fault. If we'd arrived a little earlier, you wouldn't have been hurt." Wendy's hands were a little warm, making my palms sweaty, just like her hug, warm and fragrant. Maybe it was comforting, because the burning pain in my leg felt much weaker. I turned away from her, pulling my hand back without hesitation. "You guys should leave. I'm a bit tired." "Lily," Wendy wanted to say more, but Mike gently stopped her and led her out of the room. I watched them leave, focusing on Wendy's tightly clenched hand, where she had discreetly pulled out some of my hair. My scalp had hurt, but I pretended not to notice. She's got some tricks, but not many. Half a month later, Mike and Wendy came to take me home. They visited often, with Wendy almost living in the hospital with me. She frequently talked about family members, saying I had two brothers and a sister. A sister? Before they found me, I'd already figured things out. After all, I'd personally delivered a paternity test to them. They only had one daughter. The so-called sister was Linda, their daughter for 17 years. Linda, what a nice name. I couldn't help but smile. Wendy thought I liked hearing about the family, and started talking about the siblings. She would talk endlessly while I stayed silent. She asked about my past 17 years, and I remained silent. When she mentioned the brothers were eager to meet me and would treat me well, I finally spoke, eyes shining, looking at her, full of anticipation yet cautious. Really? I've been praised for my acting skills before. Seeing Wendy so happy, I had to agree. She smiled, and I smiled too, my fingers quietly playing with the blanket covering me. If they really wanted to welcome me, why hadn't anyone come to see me in half a month? The car drove into the villa. Inside it was dark and quiet. Mike and Wendy walked me to the door. The lock clicked, the lights turned on, and there was the sound of party poppers. Inside, a girl in a pink dress held up a cake with a bright smile, cheerfully saying, "Welcome home, Lily." She stood between two people. The one on the left smiled softly, welcoming me as his sister. The one on the right appeared unconcerned. Linda, sensing this, gently tugged on her brother's sleeve. Nolan said coldly, "Welcome." Mike immediately scowled, holding back anger, and yelled, "Nolan." Wendy quickly stepped in as a peacemaker, taking my hand. "Lily, Linda arranged this welcome just for you." I smiled slightly, moving with Wendy to Linda, thanking her, but tipping the cake over, smearing cream on Linda's new dress. The family's expressions changed collectively, Nolan quickly pulling Linda behind him, glaring at me. "What's wrong with you?" Linda hid behind him, her beautiful eyes filled with tears. I had to admit, she got the best of my adoptive mom's looks. Their eyes were strikingly similar, big, round, and pity-evoking. Also, her acting wasn't bad. I looked into her eyes, then at Nolan provocatively. "She took my life for 17 years. Me hating her is only fair, right?" Wendy seemed shocked by my attitude. After all, at the hospital, I'd been all smiles when hearing about Linda. What does this have to do with Linda? It's not like she did it on purpose. She's innocent. Why hate her for it? Nolan yelled. I questioned him back. What's her innocence got to do with me? Besides, who said I hate her? I stepped forward, confronting him. The one who switched the name tags back then, the real culprit, wasn't it you? Nolan recoiled, dragging Linda, and they both fell together. I laughed openly. When I first watched Autumn in my heart, I disliked the brother character intensely. Now experiencing it myself, this brother was even more annoying. Linda. Wendy hurriedly let go of me, rushing to help them, worriedly checking for injuries. Linda's chin was bruised from bumping into Nolan, red and sore. Held by Wendy, she complained, "Mom, it hurts. I think my mouth is bleeding." Nolan quickly scrambled up, apologizing to his sister. Felix, who hadn't spoken, frowned at me. That was too much. They were in chaos and I watched the scene. Wendy was anxiously looking at Linda's mouth. Nolan was clumsily apologizing. And Felix was off in a corner, calling a doctor. I've got this slight discomfort deep down. Maybe it's because Wendy's been taking such good care of me in the hospital the past few weeks. Like I've been bewitched. It's like they say, a gentle knife, each cut taking a life. The old saying isn't wrong. Mike suddenly spoke up. "Lily, I know you're hurting. But Nolan's right, Linda's innocent. You can't hold on to resentment." I knew Mike had been digging into my past, since I ended up in the hospital. I let him see what I wanted him to see. My foster parents favored boys over girls. I didn't have it easy growing up. My foster dad was an alcoholic and abusive. My foster mom was harsh, and I got mocked and discriminated against at school. Mike found all that out, but kept it from Wendy. Before he could finish talking, I cut him off, calling out, "Seriously, Mike. 200,000 and we cut family ties. I leave. Or send Linda away in a day." She goes, "I stay." Wendy froze, eyes wide with surprise, and hurriedly said, "How could you, Lily? Both you and Linda are my daughters." I ignored her, kept negotiating with Mike. "I'm still a minor. You have obligations to support me. 17 years I lived without your care. 200,000 is nothing to you. This deal's a steal, especially since Linda's monthly allowance is more than that." Mike fixed his stare on me, seriously asking, "To you it's all just business? You think we always favor Linda?" I shrugged. "Some people always think they're fair." I left the mansion. Mike and Wendy tried stopping me, so I bluntly said, "If Linda's here, I'm not." Nolan looked like he wanted to get mad, but crumbled under my gaze, a hint of guilt showing in his eyes. I gave Mike my apartment's address, told him to decide and let me know. Mike saw I was determined, and had Felix take me to my place safely. As he opened the car door, I walked away. Felix tried following, but I quickly lost him. After all, I've navigated the streets alone for years. As a girl, I've always had to be extra careful. I'm pretty skilled at giving people the slip. Well, except for David. But he always says I'm good. My sense of safety's top-notch, hard to trick. The night wind was chilly. I walked along, grabbing a flower from the flower bed as I thought about Linda's smile. I crushed it as I walked, flower juice dirtying my hand until it was unrecognizable. I hate Linda. She smiles like some idyllic book character. Like sunshine, like a sweet candy, like a beam of light. She wears new clothes, happy and lively, sweet-talking her parents and brother, with every charming word you can think of. But I'm different. I'm rotten to the core, down to the bones. A textbook villainess. When I see her eyes, I think of foster mom Lucy, her smiling as she threw my doll into the fire and held me back from saving it. I think of her shoving me into my drunk foster dad's room, listening to me being hit. I remember her taking my scholarship money right from my school bag, stomping on my books. I think of her slapping me for buying medicine for my sister, calling it a waste. I think of her dismissing my sister's death without a care. There's that saying about loving everything that comes with love, but hatred drags everything down with it too. What's on my little witch's mind? "You don't seem happy," a teasing voice called out. As I left the neighborhood gate, I spotted someone leaning against a little scooter, eyes fixed on me. I hurried over, checking out the pink finish on the scooter, decorated with a few Doraemon stickers. "Tough guy pink." I laughed, glancing at David, feigning distress. "Really? The second young master looks ridiculous on a scooter." David gave me a playful flick on the forehead to stop my act. I glared, pretending to be hurt. "Ouch. Jerk." David rubbed my now fine forehead, joking, "Girlfriends of jerks are jerks themselves." "Who's your girlfriend?" I snapped back. "You're destined for me. Where else are you gonna go?" He grinned, hands spread open, dimples showing. I rolled my eyes dramatically. If looks could kill, David would have been dead 800 times since we met. But now I thought I couldn't bear it. Seeing my flower-stained hands, David pulled out some wipes, cleaning them carefully, then gently helped me with my helmet. It was black, with cool painted in white on top. Super stylish. As a kid, when my brother watched TV, I'd sometimes tag along. The kid Nobitas always had that robot cat with him, the one who had gadgets for everything. I glanced up to David's focused face. He didn't have those magic gadgets, couldn't change my messed up life. But when did he become my Doryman? His pink helmet even had fluffy ears. I couldn't resist, reaching to pinch them while on tiptoe. Just then we got interrupted by a voice behind. "What are you doing?" I turned to see Felix, looking furious like he was catching us doing something wrong. Oh, our little moment lasted too long. Felix's eyes were wide, very much like my furious foster dad. I nudged David's shoulder and ignored Felix. "Let's go." David hopped onto the scooter, and I quickly followed. Felix shouted after us, "David, my sister's young. You think you can just whisk her away late at night?" In the circle of the rich, it's no surprise that David knows Felix. But when I thought about Felix mentioning late nights, I checked my phone. It was 8:30 p.m., and it seemed like the night owl's life had just begun. It's surprising for such a young rich kid to start a healthy lifestyle already. But apparently, it's not working. Just looking at Felix's hair, you could see a receding hairline underneath those bangs. David turned his head, raised an eyebrow at Felix and said, "Sister? Not so fast. Since when does your brain malfunction and make you think you can meddle in Lily's business?" He paused, seemingly evaluating Felix before nodding seriously and adding, "My family's private hospital has great neurologists. I can introduce you to them. Oh, and they're pretty good with hair transplants too." David must have read my mind, because he knew exactly what I was thinking. I couldn't help pulling at David's shirt, trying hard not to laugh. I'd already learned how sharp his tongue could be. Felix looked furious, like he was ready to snatch me out of the car. David twisted the handle, and his electric scooter beeped as we sped away at 25 miles per hour, leaving Felix behind. Even from a distance, it wasn't far, but Felix couldn't catch up on foot. The whole way, David hummed happily. I listened to his off-key singing. He had a nice speaking voice, but singing? Total ear torture. Using his body to shield myself from the wind, I asked David, "You won't be balding that early too, right?" The thought of David's handsome face with a bald head made me shiver. It just didn't match. Maybe we should just break up while it's easy. Nah. David gritted his teeth against the wind. "There's no baldness gene in my family." He said that. But when we actually started dating, I saw his shampoo bottles, all filled with hair strengthening benefits. The next afternoon, Mike showed up at my tiny apartment's doorstep. The place was so cramped that when Mike came in, there was barely any space to stand. I had just finished giving Coco a bath. When I found it, the puppy's little cries were barely audible over the cardboard box and traffic noise. On impulse, I had removed the box. Coco had been abandoned next to a trash can. We were similar, both unwanted, unloved. And now we were also alike. It had me, and I had David. Coco was a good dog, but it still got me wet during the bath. I was drying its fur, waiting for Mike to speak. He awkwardly sat on the plastic stool I brought over, hands on his knees, back straight. I glanced at him, wondering if he felt the stool was uncomfortable for his wealthy behind. Over the roar of the hairdryer, he carefully began, "Coco? How old is Coco?" 1 year old, I replied. Mike rubbed his hands on his suit pants and spoke quietly. "Linda said she wanted to come back last night. You know the kind of people those two are." He paused, his voice carrying a guilty tone. "Dad knows you hate us, but what you went through shouldn't happen to someone else again." I looked down, speeding up the rhythm of the hairdryer in my hand. "But don't worry, Linda won't live with us. She's in her last year of high school, and with everything that's happened, going back wouldn't be good for her exams. Your mom and I decided she should live elsewhere, so she won't bother you. If I drove Linda away, wouldn't Nolan hate me even more?" I switched off the hairdryer, didn't follow his lead, and started brushing Coco. "And anyway, it's dangerous for a girl to live alone. Wouldn't you be worried sick? You know, compared to over a decade of your relationship with her. I never planned to compete with that bond you have." Mike's face changed, and he looked around the apartment, finally settling his gaze on me. My words unintentionally reminded him that I, too, Was a girl living alone in this tight space, and nobody fretted over my safety. With a hint of impatience, I said seriously, I just wanted to cut ties with $200K. Being parentless but well off suits me just fine. Lily, Mike called me out. You're too radical, isolating yourself and dwelling on the past, sharing your pain with others and dragging them down. Can't you give your parents a chance? We won't play favorites. But I want favoritism. I suddenly tossed the brush on the floor, the noise startling Mike and scaring Coco. Coco bumped its head against my hand, so I petted it, took a deep breath to regain composure. Sharing my pain with others? I retorted, so getting beaten, yelled at, or starved was my own fault. Mike hurriedly clarified, that's not what I meant. I already told you. Just hand over the money, I interrupted. It's you who insisted on showing off and forcing me back, while seeking forgiveness for free. A tear fell at the perfect moment. I swiped my face quickly, stood up, and opened the door. You should go back. Mike didn't want to leave, but with the door open and my standing there in a knowing posture, he didn't have much choice. We met eyes. He seemed to want to say something, but I looked away. After he left, I eagerly hugged Coco and exclaimed, sorry for scaring you, Coco. But wow, wasn't my acting fantastic? I'm definitely a future star, the next big sensation in Hollywood. I couldn't help but burst into laughter, tears randomly welling up in my eyes. How could the tears forced out through acting not retract? It felt too good to stab at others' hearts. For having suffered alone for so long, why should I suffer alone? Coco licked my face, and my eyes finally stopped leaking. I went to wash my face, the chilled water calming my agitated heart. Still too young. Once emotions were released, they were hard to rein back in. Guess they say you get darker with certain company. Too many hits from that person left me following along, angry and irritable. That feeling hit me even harder when I was around my adoptive family. Thinking about it, I decided to drench myself with cold water from head to toe. Unsurprisingly, I caught a cold and a fever. It hit me hard. I never used to get sick, so why am I always sick now? I sniffled, my nose all stuffed up. Breathing through my mouth made my throat dry and sore. David was by my bedside, bustling around, pouring me hot water, putting a heat patch on me, and making sure I had my cold medicine. He originally planned to take me to the hospital, but I refused. Even when he brought a doctor to me, I threw a tantrum and refused to see him, acting like a total brat. Annoyingly so. I glanced at David's concerned face, cleared my throat, and with much effort said, I never used to get sick like this. It must be because of you. My voice was nasal and hoarse, and it made my throat hurt even more. But at least David laughed, all teasing eyes. How could it be my fault? I blinked a few times, my head feeling hot and painful, like it was burning up. I turned my head slightly, stay away, or you'll catch it. But David just pinched my ear, teasing, embarrassed? Your ears are so red they're about to bleed. I blamed it on the fever, pulling the blanket over my head. With a grumpy, it's the fever. David pulled the blanket off my head, poked me. Aren't you suffocating under there? I was about to reply when he tucked me back in, gently saying, all right, no more teasing. You need to rest to get better. Then he opened the drawer beside the bed and asked, what fairy tale does our Lily want to hear today? Whenever I'm sick, he reads me a bedtime story to help me sleep. I thought for a moment, sniffling Jack and the Beanstalk. David smoothly opened the book and started reading with his calming voice, like a lullaby. In a sleepy haze, I felt an itch on my nose and heard him teasingly call me a brat. There were sounds of doors and footsteps, and I heard someone suggest taking me to the hospital. I wanted to protest, but I was too tired to open my eyes, only managing to clutch David's shirt instinctively. I hated hospitals. My sister had died in one, after Lucy refused to pay for surgery, saying casually, if she dies, she dies. Tears rolled down my cheeks, and I heard David pleading with me, Lily, let's go to the hospital, okay? With David there, maybe he wouldn't let me die. I slept for a long time, dreaming bits and pieces about the past. Before I was 5, the beatings weren't so bad, nothing life-threatening. We lived in the village then. Women gossiping would always mention I didn't look like my adoptive father, hinting at infidelity on my adoptive mom's side. That gossip reached his ears, and he looked at me colder each day. One day, he threw a paternity report at Lucy, beat her, dragged me out from the corner, and kicked me, even trying to strangle me. Choking and helpless, death was just a breath away. My sister saved me, drawing his attention away with his crying 2-year-old son. After checking if the son was okay, Lucy had to do a test too. After that, I was the only one getting beaten. They wanted to discard me, but I ran to the village office for help. When it was time to start school, they didn't plan on sending me, but it was mandatory, so they had to. The walk from the village to the town's elementary school took me over an hour. For safety, the school required kids not living in town to board unless they had someone to pick them up. They wouldn't pay, so I walked daily. A teacher, seeing this, offered to sponsor my boarding fee, but the couple refused. No free labor if I didn't come home every day. Most of what I owned was charity from good-hearted strangers. I reported my situation to the authorities because I've always been a bit rebellious. But nothing happened since I was so young, and they were my guardians. After that, they'd lock me up after beatings, telling the teacher I was sick. At school, besides being called poor and a scavenger, they started calling me sickly. I couldn't afford to be sick, knowing the couple wouldn't care for me. My sister was my only ally, secretly giving me candies and money to buy things. She'd always tell me to run away, far away, but she got stuck there, finding her escape in death, suicide from depression. Lucy didn't hesitate to let her go, because the surgery would cost too much. They threw her a shabby funeral, more concerned about the condolences than their loss. Mike and Wendy came to see me, bringing a lot of supplements. Wendy's eyes were red and she looked worn out. She nervously said, "Lily, you said you'd come home once Linda was gone. She's not here anymore. Once you're better, I'll take you home, okay?" I nodded, and she seemed relieved, then asked, "Do you want any fruit? An apple? I'll peel it for you." I moved in. Wendy excitedly showed me around the room they prepared especially for me. Before entering, I imagined it'd be like the pink princess rooms you read about. Not that I'd like it, but at least there wouldn't be a musty smell or no light getting in. But the reality was a chic, monochrome design, complete with dog stuff. On the white bed sat a life-size Doraemon plush, and at the foot of the bed, smaller ones lined up. What thrilled me the most was a glass display, filled with action figures of Optimus Prime, Iron Man, Ultraman, and Doraemon. Wendy said, "David told me you liked these, so your dad and I decided on this design. Do you like it?" She looked at me expectantly. I nodded and thanked her sincerely. On my first night there, Mike and Wendy took me to register my residence. I don't want to change my name, so I'm still going by Lily. Nolan feels both guilty and angry with me, so he just ignores me. Felix has gone abroad for business. At dinner, Mike and Wendy keep putting food on my plate. I rebelliously want to feed it all to Coco, but think better of it, not wanting Coco to get a stomachache. The second day after moving in, Wendy took me to the mall. Clothes, jewelry, bags, shoes. She almost bought out the whole place for me. I secretly complained to David about how tiring shopping was. He replied, asking if I wanted little Olhem to carry me around. I told him to shove it. The third day in, Wendy took me to get a custom dress, saying she wanted to throw me a party. In the evening, Felix came back, surprisingly with a gift for me. At dinner, Mike and Wendy were still serving me food. Nolan's phone rang, and before answering, he gave me a sneaky glance. Blind guess Linda. Sure enough, not long after he answered, he angrily stood up. What? How can they hit her? You wait. I'll come get you right now, sis. Wendy got anxious when she heard that. Nolan? What happened? Nolan, looking furious, said, Mom, Linda's getting hit by that family. What? Wendy got flustered. How did she end up there? We need to go get her, fast. She was just about to stand up. Her eyes paused on me. Nolan called out confusedly, seeing Wendy watching my expression. It made him angrier. Need you be so cruel? If you want revenge, come at me. Nolan, watch your tone. Mike, who had been silent, suddenly spoke up. Nolan glanced disapprovingly at his father. Dad, aren't you going to care about Linda? Is blood relation that important? After that, he shot me a harsh look and stormed out, knocking over the chair. Felix put down his chopsticks and calmly said, He's too emotional to drive. I'll follow him. Silence filled the room. Wendy nodded awkwardly at me. Lily. I tossed the shrimp she gave me onto the table, put down my chopsticks and said, I'm done eating, you guys enjoy. I headed upstairs and Mike called after me, don't just lie in bed after eating. Remember to walk with Coco. Linda ended up in the hospital. She sent me pictures. Nolan peeling an apple for her. A chicken soup captioned with Mom made it for me. And Mike and Wendy walking away with their backs turned. Oh, I forgot to mention we know each other. After all, we went to the same high school. She was in the elite class, I was in the red letter class. It's quite a coincidence. The first time we met, she bumped into me laughing with friends, spilling greasy soup all over me. With a sweet voice she told me, hey, watch where you're going. No need to pay me back for the meal though. I didn't say a word. Went and got mapo tofu and minced eggplant. The cafeteria loved pouring oil on those. With a little nudge and a slip, I dumped my tray on her shoulder. I said, oops, sorry, it wasn't on purpose. After school, I got cornered by Nolan and his crew. The privileged soon forget he might remember the incident, but forgot who kneeled and apologized. She seems to think I'd feel jealous, sad, or aggrieved. Honestly, not sure. I guess we'll see. Mike and Wendy added me on social media the day I moved in. I posted Linda's pictures, visible only to Mike and Wendy. What a model family, really. For all the time she targeted me. Does she not realize I'm not one to take things lying down? Before long, my door was knocked. I was petting Coco, didn't respond. Wendy's voice came from the other side. Lily, can we talk? I opened the door, seeing Wendy nervously gripping her phone. Her life had been smooth, adored by a husband, loved by sons, and a daughter who's her heart. I guess I'm her life's stumbling block, constantly leaving her flustered. Lily, I saw what you posted. Linda's the child I raised for years. I can't completely turn my back on her. She reasoned with me. I know you don't like Linda and don't want to hear this, but I believe you understand the situation. You and Linda are both victims. You should try to move on and leave the past behind, right? After a moment of silence, she got to the point. Linda wanted to see her biological parents, to witness the life you lived. And those people value boys over girls. While Linda was sitting, their son started hitting her for no reason. Linda pushed him back and ended up getting beaten by them. Her arms are marked, her face slapped, her head hit a cabinet. And she's got bruises. It's surprising to hear about her situation. If you're worried, bring her back then. Wendy hesitated. Didn't you say? I didn't reply, and she kept praising me. Lily, you're such a good kid. We'll bring her back and send her away after college entrance exams, okay? I just kept petting the dog. Seeing I wasn't going to talk more, she eventually left the room hesitantly. Watching her leave, I asked, aren't you curious about how I got those pictures? Wendy didn't answer and just bolted. Yep, she'd fled. Didn't see her for the rest of the afternoon. Towards evening, Mike came home. He said, Lily, can we talk? Why do they all want to talk? I don't get it, not at all. I followed him into the study, a place I'd never been before. Curiously, I looked around. A huge family portrait of 5 was hung on the wall, each face beaming like flowers. I couldn't help but click my tongue. Man, I sure turned that happy family of 5 upside down. Mike motioned for me to sit across from him. Then he left and came back with a bottle of coconut milk, opening it for me. David said you like this, so I got it for you. David said. David sure spilled all my secrets. Thanks. I took the bottle, not really planning to say more. Mike was direct. He showed me a post from my social media and asked, how do you know Linda? Oh, I spilled food on her in the cafeteria. Mike frowned. I drank the coconut milk slowly, chewing some jelly bits now and then. Clearly, that's not the answer he wanted. The whole food spilling incident didn't match with his image of Linda. In his mind, Linda's his sweet and well-behaved little girl, not someone who'd hold such a grudge. After what felt like ages of silence, I was almost done with my drink when he finally said, I'll look into it and give you an explanation. An explanation for me? I blinked at him. It's better not to pretend you're doing this for someone else's sake. Whatever he found out would shatter Linda's image he's held for the past 17 years. He just wanted proof that Linda wasn't as nasty as she's been portrayed. There had to be another reason she was picking on me. After all, he'd probably find out it was me who sent that paternity test. A biological daughter secretly wanting to come home versus the sweet, Dutiful Linda they raised for 17 years. The truth of who's more deceitful is pretty clear. Sorry. His quick apology caught me off guard. Mike seemed to switch gears after taking a deep breath, shifting the topic. Maybe you can tell me more about you and David sometime. Guess the big boss is too busy running the company. I tossed the empty coconut milk bottle into the trash. As I opened the door, I heard movement downstairs. A gentle female voice instructed, "Be careful not to bump Linda." The soundproofing was pretty good. I hadn't heard a peep before opening the door. Peeking over the railing, I saw Wendy and Nolan had brought Linda and the whole bed into the living room. Wow, rich folks are something else. Even moved the bed with the person on it. No wonder Wendy was missing all afternoon. Worried I'd changed my mind, rushing to bring her back. "What are you doing with Linda back here?" Mike suddenly said behind me. I glanced at him sideways. He didn't look too happy. Interesting. The people downstairs looked up, their expressions souring like they were caught doing something sneaky. Wendy awkwardly grabbed the bed frame. Smiling, "Lily said I could bring Linda back until she's done with the college exams." Mike looked at me skeptically. I was completely straightforward. "Yep," I agreed. "Mrs. Can't bear to part from her darling daughter. I'm a kind soul, can't stand to see families split. I go when she comes back, simple as that." Mike's expression was like, just as I thought. Nolan downstairs went from confused to angry and shouted at me, "Lily, I thought you changed for the better, but I guess not. A bad person's just bad." Out of this group, Nolan's probably the easiest to read. Maybe because Felix was in the spotlight first, Mike and Wendy lowered their standards with the younger kids. So now Nolan is 20 and still acts like throwing tantrums will get him what he wants. I grinned and asked, "I'm bad? 2 years ago, when you forced me to apologize, didn't you figure it out then?" "What?" Everyone except Linda had a different look on their face. Mike glared at Nolan, speaking angrily. "I didn't pay for you to go to school just to bully other kids." Nolan's face turned pale, memories of a scene 2 years ago probably rushing back to him. He stammered, not making much sense. Before Mike could speak again, Linda struggled to sit up in bed. Wendy's and Nolan's attention shifted to her, while Mike's gaze on Linda was deep, possibly thinking of something. Wendy bit back whatever she was going to say to her son, admonishing her daughter instead, "Linda, your injuries haven't healed. Why are you moving around?" Linda had a bandage on her head, marks on her arms from being hit, and bruises. Even after days, the marks were still so clear. She must have been beaten up pretty bad. On the hospital bed, she knelt, body trembling, eyes wet with tears. "I'm so sorry, Mom and Dad. Second bro acted only to protect me. After Lily spilled food on me, he was mad and wanted her to apologize. But Lily's stubborn and wouldn't. It was my fault for telling him in the first place." Nolan quickly reassured her, "No, it wasn't your fault. Big brother's supposed to stand up for little sister, right? It was her fault, not yours." "Nolan." Mike cut him off coldly, like he had a hunch. "You forced her to apologize on her knees. That was right?" Nolan and Mike locked eyes. And then he couldn't help but snap back, seeing my smug face on the side. "You've always taught me to apologize when wrong, and to protect my sister. Now you're blaming me because you know she's actually your real daughter?" He added defiantly, "I'll just kneel and apologize back. Even bow my head 3 times if I have to." "Nolan." Second bro, stop. Wendy and Linda both tried to stop him. I was having a ball watching the drama unfold, chiming in, "Go ahead, kneel." "Lily." Wendy wasn't having it this time. "Do you really have to make things so hard? Besides, you did make a mistake back then, and Nolan was just too intense." She added, "I even asked for your opinion today. You were the one who agreed Linda could come back." I nodded, yep, didn't object. "So what's the deal now?" Wendy snapped, her frustration spilling over. "Isn't everything chaotic enough already? We thought bringing you back would help. But maybe that was a mistake," she muttered, a hint of regret in her voice. "Hey, Wendy." Mike quickly cut her off, sounding pretty serious. His interruption stopped Wendy from saying more. She caught herself, glancing at her daughter with a blank expression. How could she even think this way? "You know I didn't grow up with a mom's love, right? Unlike Linda, who had a great mom." I chuckled, thinking about it. Wendy's face turned even paler. Seeing her regret, I helpfully reminded her, "Remember? I said when I first got here, it's either her or me. Mike didn't hesitate with his decision, making it clear there'd be no arguing. Nolan, take her back to the hospital. She needs to recover properly without wandering around. Nolan looked like he wanted to protest, but stopped when Linda tugged his hand. Let's just go back to the hospital, Nolan, she said, tears wetting her hospital gown. Nolan shot a glance between Mike and me, still looking a little ticked off. Dad, does blood relation really matter that much? We agreed that even if Lily returned, Linda's still a part of this family. But then when Lily showed up, you pushed Linda out. Now she's in this state and still can't come back? I watched him, a bit amused at how persistent he was. When he stopped for an answer, I leaned on the railing. Nolan, you've always been nice to Linda, thinking she's your real sister. Would you have done the same if she weren't? I asked with a smile. At first, wasn't it all about the blood relation? You can't even stand by your own argument, yet you question others. It's pointless. Linda ended up returning to the hospital and couldn't come back here anymore. These past few days, Nolan acted like he was dodging me, barely around the house. Heading out that morning, I was surprised to see Felix in the living room having breakfast. Unexpectedly, he greeted me with a morning. I looked at his smile, hearing a voice in my head, "Are you okay?" I ignored him, but Felix spoke again, "Not having breakfast? I can give you a ride." "No need. Accept my friend request." Then, he insisted while I was changing shoes, now standing right behind me. I glanced at him. "What's the point of adding you? You're my sister, why not? I'll give you $2 million if you do. Are you out of your mind?" I shot him a disdainful look, but quickly added him. Showing him my phone, I asked, "Okay, where's my payment?" He calmly pulled a card from his pocket, looking like he anticipated this. "The password?" I asked after taking it from him. "All zeros. You wanted money that much? Why didn't you ask for more back then?" Not bothering to glance at him, I said, "What, you think I'm desperate or something?" "No, just wondering if you'd regret not asking for more if our parents agreed." Finished putting on my shoes, I stood up. "Big shot. Where do you think we are?" I didn't walk away with just 20 grand. And if you couldn't see through my plan, are you sure you're on to me? I didn't come here for the money. 20 grand might seem a lot to some, but it doesn't match Linda's allowance in this family. The bigger the contrast, the more guilty and prideful they felt. Sure, they wouldn't let go of their daughter over some 20 grand. Felix didn't really respond. "Don't call me big shot. Maybe call me brother one day?" Blocking my path, I rolled my eyes at him. "Depends on my mood. Like if you hand over all your shares. That's a big ask." I rarely smiled at him, ready to leave, only to be blocked again. "Big shot. Aren't you better off taking care of your dear sister, rather than being a roadblock? They've got enough people there." I remembered Linda's messages. She never mentioned Felix. Eventually, he let me pass but didn't stop reminding me. "You're young, be careful with David. Don't get caught up. Be back for dinner. And call if you need anything." I didn't bother replying. And to David selling me out? He's been doing that all along. Everything I liked or needed, he spilled it all when questioned. No wonder he grinned last night, saying I'd hit it big. Time passed slowly, David studying abroad, returning every 6 months, while I was now a senior. My adoptive parents got sent to prison by Mike. They're stuck there for most of their lives. Wendy's guilt towards me deepened, but I knew how forgetful and changeable she was. Amongst them, her feelings toward me were the most mixed. For over 50 years, everyone coddled her until I showed up. Despising yet guilt-ridden, she grudgingly put up with my pressuring. Sometimes she couldn't hide her annoyance and resentment. Their arranged party for my recognition as family arrived, and Wendy suggested I try on a dress. I asked curiously, weren't there just a few picked? Why are there so many now? Wendy smiled, some new ones came in, and your mom thought they'd suit you. I noticed one dress missing, a yellow one from before. Wendy probably added more to avoid my notice. I just let out an "oh" as she visibly relaxed. She eagerly picked a dress for me, suggesting, "How about this one, Lily?" It was an off-the-shoulder light blue princess dress, with a fluffy skirt dotted with tiny crystals. Under the lights, it sparkled like stars. "Great," I said gleefully. As I changed, I glanced at the burn scar covering half my left shoulder. "If you don't look closely, it's fine." But when you do, it's like the burning pain from that night comes back. I pushed down my emotions and called out, "Mom, can you help me? I can't get this zipper up." This high-end dress definitely didn't have zipper problems. But calling her mom was enough to keep Wendy's attention away from it. Wendy rushed in, excitedly looking at me. "Lily, what did you just call me?" I didn't respond. She didn't press on. Her hands paused as she was about to help with the zipper before she couldn't help it and pulled the dress aside, her eyes instantly tearing up. The scars on my back, horizontal, vertical, circular, and the large one on my shoulder were a shock to her. She ran her fingers over the scars, choking up, and asked, "Lily, your injuries?" Suppressing the tickle and urge to run, I said casually, "Oh, I guess it was from a belt or something. The round ones are easy to recognize from cigarette burns." "Must have hurt," she said. "Forgot about it." I just remember thinking, lying on the floor, they knew I wasn't their daughter. What about my real parents? Didn't they notice, or didn't they want me? Wendy instinctively wanted to protest, "No, it's not that." The couple trusted each other completely, so they never thought of doing a DNA test. Plus, Linda, at first glance, did have some facial similarities. Linda just needed to act cute and so charm, and Wendy would spoil her with the best the world had to offer. Why doubt it? After a moment of silence, Wendy softly kept saying, I'm sorry." "No need," I said. "A costless sorry holds no value, no matter how many times you say it." I asked, "Are we not zipping it up?" Wendy fought her tears, looked at the scar on my shoulder, and then carefully asked, "Don't you want to change?" "No, it's fine," I said with a smile. "This dress looks great, doesn't it? And you picked it out yourself." I didn't know. Wendy wanted to argue, but in the end, she just zipped it up and said she'd step out for a bit before leaving. Probably to go cry somewhere. She left too fast to notice my smug smile behind her. From the start, I was never after the warmth and happiness of a family. Being a rich heiress is worth much more than being a poor girl whose foster parents ended up in jail. David's the eldest son of his family. He might not care about social status, but I do. Cinderella marrying into a wealthy family? Not my style. David got me out of that hellhole and gave me a new future. He's the sun that broke through the clouds, lighting up my world. Climbing trees, catching fish, living a childhood. He even helped me get back at those kids who bullied me. First theme park visit, first bubble tea, first movie, first birthday celebration. He showed me so many new experiences. I used to think the world was dull. Then I realized how beautiful the blue sky, white clouds, moon, stars, sunrises, sunsets, mountains, and rivers really are. So I kept working hard to get closer to David, to tie us together. Mike wants to hear my story with David, but I don't want to waste my breath or share David with anyone else. If I had the means, I'd be like a character from a novel, holding on to him possessively. When David started looking into my background, an idea came to mind. Being a wealthy heiress is the fastest way to earn money and power, given my current means. At least judging by the rapid growth in my bank account, it's working. If Linda doesn't provoke me, I might hold on to grievances from the past, but I won't go out of my way to push her out. I'm not dumb enough to compete for affection against someone they've known for 17 years. What I want is their guilt. Seeing my madness, rejection, and pain contrasted against Linda's wonderful upbringing will eat away at them with guilt, eventually wearing down their feelings for her. It also satisfies my desire for revenge, sharing our pain. My heart's been sick for some time. Mike thinks Wendy would be heartbroken to know about my abuse, so I made Wendy witness the scars firsthand. I was surprised when Linda got hit, not because it was severe. Ever since my foster parents reported it when I was 12, they never left obvious marks. I don't know what Linda did to get such visible bruises. At the banquet, I appeared under everyone's gaze, and Mike and Wendy introduced me to the guests. They congratulated me, their eyes inevitably drawn to the scar on my shoulder. David's parents came. In private, David's mom gave me a bracelet and complimented my looks, calling me a good kid, but didn't mention David. Linda attended too. She hadn't been removed from her household registration. Technically, she was still an heiress. Whether she came or not influenced gossip among the guests. Seeing how Mike treated me, fewer people tried to cozy up to her. Seeing her in that yellow dress, I gave Wendy a knowing glance and a smile. Mike was particularly attentive to me. When introductions finally ended, Felix came to ask me for a dance. Main star, care to honor me with a dance? I shook my head. My first dance is reserved for David, even if he's abroad. Felix shrugged. At some point he picked up this gesture. I looked at him and asked, when did you start copying others? I hadn't noticed before, but over time, I realized Felix mimics David's tone when he talks. He's calm and gentle by nature, so using a lively tone always felt off. If I can't approach you the old way, I'll change it to something you're familiar with, Felix smiled. I shook my head, saying there's no need to waste effort. Felix suddenly changed his expression and stared behind me. I was puzzled until a man's voice called out, Miss, may I have the pleasure of a dance with a handsome guy? No matter how many times I've heard it, that familiar voice still makes my heart race. I turned to look at him and asked, weren't you supposed to be abroad and couldn't come back? David smiled. I promised I wouldn't miss your important moments. I gotta keep my promise. Besides, if I don't come back, who's gonna dance the first dance with my little witch? Dance with a handsome guy. Is there another handsome guy here besides me? I was about to respond when Felix gave me a wistful look and interjected me. Are you okay? David and I replied in unison, eyes full of disbelief. David chuckled and pulled me into the dance floor. My first dance, just as I'd hoped, was with him. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Linda approach Wendy, linking her arm, only for Wendy to gently push her away. 3 months later, Linda surprisingly messaged asking to meet. The meeting spot was at another villa Mike and Wendy had set up for her, less than 500 meters from here. The place was meticulously prepared, with a classic European style, like a princess's castle. This was originally a coming-of-age birthday gift my parents were planning for me. They intended to give it to me on my birthday, but because you returned, they gave it to me early. Okay, I yawned. David and I deal with time zones since he's abroad, and our phone calls sometimes lead to late nights. Now I was super tired. I said, if you have something to say it quickly. I'm heading back to catch up on sleep. She stared at me, Lily. My life was taken by you in the end. I took yours. I let out a laugh that I couldn't hold back. Some people are truly shameless. Linda continued. What did you tell Mom? Why is she acting weird? Sometimes she's nice to me, but other times she avoids me when I get close. Dad hardly comes to see me anymore. And when he does, it's just to accompany Mom. Big brother doesn't care for me like before. He only responds if I message him first. Even the second brother. Even he acts mysteriously, and I have no idea what he's up to. Okay, I responded nonchalantly. She probably thought I couldn't see how frequently Wendy and Nolan visited her place. When Felix brought gifts, he always brought 2 sets. Felix was careful, worried that it would bother me, so he made sure they were different gifts. When Linda couldn't provoke me, she switched topics. Lucky you, right? Without all this, you wouldn't have met David. But I heard his family already has a favored daughter-in-law in mind. You're just a fleeting taste for David. That's it? I replied dismissively. You're inflating your ego. Meeting David had nothing to do with you. Everything you have isn't really yours. Even the name Linda isn't. My words hit a nerve with Linda, and she got mad. Lily, there are smart people besides you in this world. She started shouting. It's not like I swapped you on purpose when you were switched. It's your lack of fortune, your refusal to accept, that brought you back here to ruin my life. Linda grew up being spoiled. As a child, her whims would be indulged by Mom and her second brother. But once she overheard rumors. Staring at the family photo, her differing features stood out starkly. Panic struck, leading her to spend money on a DNA test. Not hers. Truly not hers. From then on, her rebellious streak faded, replaced by efforts to please her family. Mike and Wendy praised her maturation, prompting her to question them. Will you abandon me? They comforted her. How could you think that? Linda is our precious, and we'd never leave you. Thinking she experienced something traumatic, they gave her even more reassurance after that query. Linda cherished it all, loving the home she had always known. Silently, she wished the other child wouldn't appear. Until one day, Nolan brought a notorious student, a poor girl students knew well, to school. Seeing their stark resemblance panicked her. It happened. Linda initially paid $500,000, hiring someone to drive Lily away. Not enough. Raised the offer. Whatever it took to expel her from the city. A voice in her head questioned the morality. But she despised Lily, fearing she'd steal her family's affection. Their first meeting ended with soup spilled all over Linda. Plus, going back to adoptive parents was unthinkable. She thought later, she'd secretly send Lily some money. Why are you like a leech that can't be shaken off? Why, after 2 years, are you still in this city? I saw her as she angrily yelled. And at that moment, Linda resembled her real parents. It's your greed. I'm greedy. Linda chuckled. Nah, you're the heartless ones. You're the ones who can't live poor. I did so much, tried to please you humbly. I foolishly thought that the day you came back, they wouldn't abandon me. They promised they wouldn't, assuring me again and again before you returned that I was still their daughter. And they'd treat me the same as before. But they didn't. Do you have any idea how annoying you are? You ruined a supposedly happy family. You're just jealous of me, dragging me down into the mud with you. Watching Linda freak out and wanting to smash things, I suddenly laughed. Jealous of you? Well, maybe once. I still can't forget that day. Linda wore a dress holding a cake, her eyes smiling like crescents just like the moon. So lovely. Like how could jeans lie, Linda? I called out to her. Your freakout looks just like your biological dad's tantrums. Linda paused, remembering that day her youngest brother kicked her, pulled her hair. She couldn't help but push him down, and her so-called mom slapped her, pushed her to the ground. Her head hit the cabinet. Linda wanted to fight back, but she was too weak and got beaten badly. Desperate, she thought if she got beaten worse, her mom wouldn't stand by. She'd finally take her back home. Wendy indeed felt bad, and insisted on taking her home regardless of whether Lily agreed. Yet, her brother was nowhere to be found. Mike came along with Wendy, always staring at her injuries, as if seeing another person in her miserable state. Unexpectedly, her return home got messed up by Lily again. Linda, from the start, I wanted to kick you out completely. I smiled, even to the point of removing you from the family registry. No matter how bad they felt, it couldn't erase their feelings for Linda. Especially since, in Wendy's heart, I'm the rebellious one, and Linda's the obedient one. Wendy felt bad seeing my condition, and worried Linda's parents might awkwardly reject her. And Linda's obedience only invited more care from Wendy. I'd been thinking about how to get her out for good. This was perfect timing, really, just as I was about to fall asleep. Someone handed me a pillow. What do you mean? Linda froze. I pulled out my phone. I've got this habit. You know, I always leave some evidence whenever there's something or someone notable. I said, and the waveform on the recording app was still moving. Linda's pupils widened, and she lunged for my phone. I caught her easily, whispering in her ear with a chuckle. You think I'm the unlucky one to stay here? I pushed her down. She landed on the couch, giving me a mean stare. Looks like you can't stay in this house any longer. My luck seems to be just around the corner. I waved my phone at her, grinning. Thanks for the gift. I walked away, not noticing Linda's increasingly odd expression behind me. I eagerly created a group chat with a few folks. Yep, I even added Nolan as a friend. 6 million. Who would ever say no to more money? As soon as I did, Felix dropped I sent the recording, no editing, nothing. Their faces weren't going to look good now. I imagined the scene, filled with expectation. A car sound came from behind. I had a bad feeling. It sped towards me. With my good eyesight, I immediately saw Linda. Crazy. I cursed, going full sprint, staying calm, heading for the obstacles. As she got closer, Linda seemed to snap out of it suddenly. She turned the wheel and slammed on the brakes. A loud bang followed. The car hit the flower bed sideways. Linda got out, shaken, plopped down on the ground. How could she be so evil, have murderous thoughts? The crash drew people to come and watch. I stared Linda down, clenched my fists, doing my best to stay calm. Linda, get ready for jail time. Without hesitation, I called the cops. The process was swift. Wendy went to see Linda, glanced at me afterward, holding back words. Seeing Wendy, I knew she had made her choice. I spoke up. Are you trying to plead for her? God knows, even running fast, I was still scared to death inside. She shook her head. closing her eyes, struggling, but spoke anyway. I thought all my life as a couple, we were loving, our kids understanding and filial. I thought we were successful. But now, having raised a kid like this, I've undeniably failed. Your dad and I have been together over 30 years. Because of you, he and I argued several times. He didn't soothe me like I had hoped. In the hospital, seeing how well behaved you seemed, I thought you were an understanding child who'd get along with Linda. Mistaking feelings comes naturally, especially since I'm pretty good at lying. I muttered, changing the subject. Think I shouldn't have insisted on bringing you back that day? Yes. Wendy nodded honestly. Are you disappointed? As your mom, how could I think that? I shook my head. Not at all. From the start, I knew she'd choose Linda first between us. When she left my hospital bedside mid-apple peel to talk with Linda, when she spoke of Linda with radiant kindness, when she let go of my hand to check Linda's injuries, her eyes momentarily filled with reproach for me. David came to visit me in the hospital then, complaining, always finding me all alone. But I compared her to Lucy, fooling myself. Thankfully, she didn't give much, and I got out just in time. Wendy finally spoke. Lily, for the last time. Linda did something crazy because of me. She did wrong and should be punished, but I can't just watch her life get ruined. I'm the only one who can help her. Maybe it's the last bond we have as mother and daughter. She gave me one last look, her figure looking forlorn, then stumbled away. I turned my gaze. Honestly, among us, Wendy was the most greedy. She wanted both daughters but in the end lost both. Wendy wants to help Linda. So Felix from Mike's side couldn't go against his wife and mom. My lawyer ended up relying on David's contacts. I didn't tell David, afraid he'd worry. Unexpectedly, David's parents came to see me. As soon as we met, David's mom hugged me tightly and patted my back like I was a child. Lily, don't be scared, don't be scared. Mom's here, she'll stand up for you. Her voice seemed to have magic, and I felt a sudden wave of emotion, almost bringing me to tears. David's dad, hearing her address, coughed lightly to remind her, don't scare the young girl. David's mom shot him a glance. What do you know? It's just a matter of time. David's dad looked at her helplessly, and then at me, trying to smile despite his stern face. Our Lily is so kind, such a good kid. If no one else does, I'm here to care for you. I wanted to say, I'm not actually that kind. Her son chose to help me at first, because he was afraid I'd grow up to cause trouble. That day, David's mom practically dragged me away, teasing me along the way. I was a bit dazed, following along until we were in David's room before I snapped back. Good child, you must be scared. Mom will stay with you tonight, chase away all the demons and monsters. No need, ma'am, I instinctively refused. I can sleep alone. Don't call me ma'am. David's mom squinted and pinched my cheek, smiling. No need to be shy, no need to be polite with mom. Oh, she exclaimed, pulling a storybook from the side of the bed. I heard from that kid you like listening to stories. I fell silent. I wondered how many people David had spilled my secrets to. David's mom gleefully opened the book, cleared her throat, and got really excited. I've always wanted to know what having a daughter felt like. Daughters are so much nicer, sweet-smelling and obedient, way better than those rascals. Oh, do you want to hear about that rascal's embarrassing moments? Let me tell you, he wet the bed when he was 8. Tried to cover it up with a hairdryer, but the smell, oh boy. David's mom rambled on like a chatterbox. I listened, all smiles, watching her animated expressions and gestures. Linda said they already had a daughter-in-law in mind. I think I know who it is now. I was worried about disturbing David's mom with my sleep habits. But the next morning, I found myself cuddled in her arms. In that moment, I closed my eyes, a bit reluctant to get up. David's mom was so kind. I couldn't believe I once thought of running away with her son. I was guilty but didn't change. When I did get up, I happened to see David's brother. He greeted me with a smile. I've seen him before. Back when David first learned to ride a bike, he confidently wanted to give me a ride. I agreed, and we both ended up face planting on the ground. He got caught, and got quite a scolding from his brother. Snapping back from memory, I heard David's mom chastising her eldest. Some people just don't know better, nearly 30 and no partner. You prod and prod, but it doesn't help. Thank goodness the younger one got it right. Snagged a daughter-in-law early. I blushed. David's call came through, asking if I was okay. I reassured him so much that he finally let it go. I said, "You keep taking breaks and flying around. What about your studies?" "I'm really okay." I even asked how he knew. David rubbed his nose and replied, "My dad. He called at dawn, saying my wife ran off with his." He was lying, but I didn't press it. I stayed with them for a week, with David's mom taking me around. Unlike Wendy, who just bought anything she liked, David's mom asked if I had anything in mind I wanted. If not, she'd take the lead, holding things up to see if I liked them. After a week, I decided to go back. The conditions they offered were tempting. Wendy's 10% shares and 35% from my late grandfather's company. As for Mike's side, shares were to be given entirely to me when Felix and Nolan came of age, effective when I turned 18. My hired lawyer was competent, and with solid evidence, Linda still went to jail. Mike took Wendy on a trip to unwind. Nolan chose to move into the school dorms, telling me before leaving, "Linda asked me to apologize to you and to say sorry for what I caused you." I replied, not accepting or forgiving. Felix became the only one at home. With Mike giving him all the work, he got busier. Yet he still made it home daily. Every morning at breakfast, he'd be there. In the next term, Wendy came back. During the intense senior year, she was busy making soup for me every day. I accepted it all, adding a cold thank you. I didn't move out for school housing. After all, I'm not the one who feels guilty, not the one who's overly humble, not the one clinging to false hopes. I have no reason to hide. To me, it doesn't make any difference anymore, whether the meals are made by her or the nanny. For the college entrance exam, I got into the university I wanted. At the coming-of-age ceremony, I received a big gift. Not sure if they heard it from David, but a bunch of people all gave me money. I don't really expect much affection from them, but I can definitely feel moved by money. The day before my 18th birthday, Felix had a talk with me. We talked about a lot of things. Finally, Felix asked me when he'd hear me call him brother. I told him I'd said it back then. He asked why I needed so much money. I said, to save money for David's future. He's really got you hooked. I gave a slight smile. It's not that he had me bewitched. If David hadn't shown up, and there was that slightest chance I'd reconnect with my family, our relationship might have gotten better. But that's not the case. David filled most of the roles in my life and stole all their spotlight. If one day someone kidnapped both David and them, I'd choose David without hesitation. At midnight, David sent me a punctual happy birthday. On my 18th birthday, Mike wanted to have a talk. Just as always, they had talks with me one after another. At the end, Mike seriously asked me, "Can I touch your head?" I took a step back. "No, I won't grow tall if you do." I know he and Felix always treated me differently from Wendy and Nolan, but I'm into dragging everyone down together. The birthday party was grand, but the star of the show left right after the thank you speech. David took me to the beach, where there were several tents and a barbecue grill. A group of people was busy around the grill and small table. David's entire family was there, a few of his best buddies, and some rare friends I made in these 18 years. I saw David's dad roll up his sleeves and hand some freshly grilled meat to David's mom. When they saw us, they set off party poppers. "Welcome our birthday star today." I grinned widely. In a dark world, there was now light. Among the stinking mud, flowers had bloomed, and with the wind came their fragrance. Whoosh bang! Fireworks exploded in the sky. David came over, interlocked his fingers with mine. Under the fireworks, he smiled boldly and whispered in my ear, "Like it, girlfriend?" I tilted my head and smiled back. "Well done. First day on the job, boyfriend." The end. David's epilogue. The first time I saw Lily, I was 10 years old. I was tagging along with my cousin to visit this old town. It was still dark outside, and there was this tiny figure walking beside the road with a flashlight. It was freezing, and her breath came out in puffs as she spoke. The puffy, faded winter coat she wore looked like it had been handed down through many people. My cousin, being the kind-hearted person he is, chatted with her and gave her a lift to the town, even treating her to breakfast. The second time I saw her was when my family was doing some charity work for a few schools. I went back to that small town where we had briefly stayed with my cousin. While my cousin was busy talking to the principal about the donations, I wandered around the school. It was during the students' lunch break when I saw someone trying to do something sneaky in a classroom. Hey, caught you. 2 years had passed, and she didn't recognize me. But I recognized her. Her features hadn't changed much, just scaled a bit larger. She glared at me and threatened, "Don't tell anyone, or I'll set a snake on you." I was about to question this snake business until she pulled out a wiggling snake from her backpack. I froze and instinctively took 2 steps back. She gave me this sweet smile. I watched in silence as she pinned the snake under 2 soaking wet mops and placed a broom on top. Her demeanor was cold and rational, completely unlike a regular elementary kid. She told me the snake wasn't poisonous, but it'd scare people easily. Classmates put dead snakes and rodents in her drawer to freak her out, isolating her. Since they like snakes so much, she decided to gift them a live one. Goosebumps ran up my arms, imagining the snake wrapped around hers. "Not scared?" I asked. She nodded calmly. "Oh, I am." She admitted that the first time, she screamed and cried in class, terrified. The teacher initially scolded the pranksters and wanted to contact their parents, but she said to let it go. "Why?" I asked, puzzled. "If they call parents, it'll reach mine. They won't come, and I'd get beaten instead." She lowered her head sadly, dropping tears. 1 second she was cold, and now she was teary-eyed, leaving me flustered. I saw her exposed arms still bore bruises, and her wrist had snake bite marks. Anger bubbled up inside me. "Don't cry. I'm telling you, hitting people is wrong. You can call the cops and have them arrested," I blurted heroically. She looked up at me, her tears still fresh, yet there seemed to be a glimmer of hope in her eyes. At that moment, I felt like this really grand figure, like some giant of light. "Really?" she asked softly. I nodded furiously. "Totally." Later, I found out she had called the police before, but it didn't help. Her name was Lily. She was smart but introverted, and everyone knew her family favored sons over daughters. Kids without parents backing often became easy targets for bullies. In the afternoon, during class, screams echoed from her classroom. It was that snake. The summer heat dried the mop quickly, and the snake kept wriggling underneath. The broom she placed over it fell due to the snake's motion. A bored boy in the back row decided to pick the broom up and saw the snake's head poking out from under the mops. Chaos erupted, with students shrieking and scrambling away, overturning desks in a panic. I followed the teacher to see what was happening and saw Lily standing still among the commotion, watching her classmates cry and yell. Noticing my gaze, she turned to meet my eyes and gave me a smile. It was a smug smile. No trace of that fragile, pitiful look earlier, verging on creepy. Suddenly, I realized she might have played me, and I worried. If someone like her keeps on this path, could she turn into a threat or take revenge on society? The next day after school, I stopped her. She glared at me. "What?" "I'm giving you a ride home, Lily." She looked at me incredulously. "We're not close. Don't act like we are." I tried draping an arm over her shoulders, grinning slyly. "Come on. We're partners in crime now. Don't be shy." She dodged, rolling her eyes. "Seriously? You want to walk home?" Going home early just means more chores for her. Plus, if she's seen driving home, there'd be hell to pay. I leaned closer and whispered, "I'll take you somewhere. Then when it's time, I'll drop you off a bit away from your house. How about it?" "Not interested," she shot back. I tugged on her backpack. "Promise you'll love it." Before she could protest, I threatened, "Or I spill the beans about the snake." Seeing her start to argue, I grinned. "You know I've got money and connections. The principal will believe me 100%. I won her over easily. I led her to an alley, tucked her in a corner and said, "Stay here. Watch what I'm about to do." She stayed silent, staring at me with unreadable eyes. I turned away. That look didn't bode well. Putting on a mask I bought earlier and holding a stick, I prepared for action. Once the target arrived, I charged out and tackled him to the ground. I had done my homework about who put the dead snake in Lily's desk. The guy, a town's day student, had a regular route home that I found. The kid was terrified, tears bursting forth. "Why are you crying? Boys shouldn't cry. Did you cry when bullying your classmate?" I scolded harshly. Using my stick, I gave him 2 hard swats on the butt. "Are you gonna bully anyone again?" I demanded. He howled and shook his head desperately. "No, I won't. No more. Bullying a kid isn't good, but I was teaching him for his future. I'm really something." I let the person go and she walked out from around the corner. I quickly grabbed her and we ran. "All right, we gotta go. What if that annoying kid calls for backup from his parents?" After we reached a safe spot, I grinned at her. "How was it? Did it feel good?" "It's just a pointless lesson. Boring." She was about to leave. I rested a stick on my shoulder. "Don't you want me to walk you home?" She stopped. In the car, she looked out the window, tilting her head. I said to myself, "Do you want to escape from here? If you do, when you finish elementary school, get the highest score in the county, and I'll take you out of here." She didn't answer, but I knew she was tempted. After a long pause, she finally said, "Guys like you, soft-hearted, are gonna get taken advantage of." I replied, "I'm not soft-hearted. I just wanted to fulfill a childhood dream, dare to be a hero for someone." She lived up to it, and came out as the top ranker in the county. Coincidentally, my grandparents moved back to their old home in the county. I helped her arrange everything, enrolled her in a school, and she lived with my grandparents while studying. She refused to freeload, so I asked my grandparents to arrange dishwashing duties for her at the old house. On weekends, she'd look for odd jobs in town, distributing flyers and running errands. I hoped she wouldn't go bad. I hardly ever did such a good deed to benefit society. To check up on her, I'd take trips there during holidays. I loved to bug her on the daily. I don't know when it happened, but one day, looking into her bright eyes, my heart suddenly started racing. Puppy love, etching itself over time. She didn't accept any fancy gifts, so I learned from a video and made her a bracelet for her first birthday with me. The year she took her high school entrance exams, I asked her to knit a scarf as a return gift. I laughed for half a day holding it. She had it rough before. Even after escaping to town, her adoptive parents still controlled her with their guardian status and registration papers. If I hadn't noticed her limping slightly, I wouldn't have known she was forced back home by her adoptive parents. Her adoptive dad drank that day and she got beaten. I was angry, but she stopped me from sending them to jail. "At least not until I can break free from them," she said. "I hate them. That's why I can't let them ruin my life." She said, as a kid, she thought being obedient would win her parents' favor, only to almost get choked to death at age 5. Later, she learned to fight back, resulting in heavier beatings. Eventually, she realized that holding on to someone's emotions and weaknesses, showing vulnerability at the right time, being tough, offering benefits, ensure better survival. Her adoptive parents' biggest flaw was their love for money and fear of stronger people. I couldn't help asking, "So how's it with me? Did you play me to make your life better too? You're the one who approached me." She turned her head away. She was right, but I was annoyed. What does turning her head mean? I decided not to talk to her for a day. That evening, I told the cook to add extra onions to all the dishes, knowing she hated them. I watched her calmly eat her food, and got even more irritated. Idiot, forcing yourself to eat when you clearly don't like it. I lost my appetite and quit eating. Under the curious eyes of my grandparents, I headed upstairs. Around 9, I got a bit hungry and thought of grabbing a snack. Then there was a knock on the door. I opened it, and there she was holding a bowl of noodles. Can't stay mad at noodles, you know. She sat by as I ate, making me feel awkward. Suddenly she said, "David, you're different from other people." Mouth full of noodles, I quickly swallowed. "Lily, do you like me? What's wrong with you?" I remembered reading that kids brought up in such troubled homes didn't know what love was. So I stocked up on novels, school dramas, and romance stories. None seemed right, so I decided to write my own. After 2 days, I handed her my first handwritten novel, asking her to read it carefully. The next day, she returned it, told me to keep working hard, and I'd make it someday. I was thrilled she might understand soon, until I saw the red ink corrections for grammar, slowed down pacing, and deletable passages. What I thought was a budding romance was actually a lousy writer meeting a talented editor. She joined me to watch the sunrise from a mountaintop. As the eastern sky turned fiery red, she seemed lost in thought. "What's on your mind?" I waved my hand in front of her face. She snapped out of it and smiled. I just never imagined I'd have the leisure to watch the sunrise one day. A few birds chirped in the morning mountain air, and I patted her shoulder. That's nothing. I'll take you to see the ocean, the plains, the desert. Unfortunately, while waiting for the sunrise, Lily caught a cold and ran a fever. She smiled wryly. Why is it, now that life's getting better, this body gets sick so easily? I watched her with guilt, determined to be more cautious next time. Leaning on her bed, she suddenly said, David, ever tell you I'm sick? I paused, half amused, looking at her. With the way you look now, no need to tell me that you're sick. Not that kind of sick. Okay, babe, whatever it is, just take your medicine. I cut her off, handing her the meds. I knew what she was hinting at. She had mental issues. Sometimes she'd get uncontrollably anxious or aggressive, smashing things or become cold, pushing everyone away. Yet, she was always rational, repressing herself and hiding it well. Half asleep, she asked, David, why do other kids get parental love and I don't? Is it because I'm bad? It was the first time seeing her so vulnerable. I gently patted her head, comforting her. How could that be, Lily? You're the best kid in the world. Really? She stayed quiet, didn't cry, and closed her eyes so obediently. I looked at her furrowed brow and thought for a moment, then said, when I was little and couldn't sleep, my parents would read me stories to help me drift off. Lily, let me read to you. Okay. She answered softly, so softly I almost missed it. Just when I thought she had fallen asleep, she suddenly said, David, you're so nice. I smiled and touched the forehead with the fever patch. Later, she found Coco and lived with Coco in a rented house, and said she finally had her own home. Don't know why, but she really wanted money. A light bulb went off in my head, and I said, I heard that when life gives someone challenges, it compensates in other ways. Why not try the lottery? She was doing summer homework. I don't believe in deities. Plus, I'm underage, can't buy lottery tickets. Just get someone to buy it for you. She couldn't resist my pestering, and went with me. She won the prize and, after taxes, ended up with $33,440,000. I asked her to treat me to dinner, and she pursed her lips, looked at me, and after a while dismissively said, David, I think you're not too bright. I pressed her head and joked, what nonsense. Hey, let go. If I'm pressed down, I won't grow tall. She went home, but I didn't expect her to get burned and end up in the hospital. The couple came every day, but often, she was alone in that hospital room. How could she have gotten burned? I was a bit angry. Seeing me upset, she comforted me. It was an accident. The first night she went home was quite a scene, so I rode my custom electric scooter to pick her up. Perfect timing. Gave her a taste of those movie scenes where the heroine sits on the back of a bike, feeling the evening breeze on her face. An electric scooter isn't too different from a bicycle. I'm her destined leading man, loving it. Her birth parents came asking about her preferences. I knew Lily had a slight hope in her heart. Small as it was, I still didn't want her hopes to be dashed. So I told them, Lily likes coconut milk, her favorite fruit is grapes, and her favorite colors are black and white. She likes meat, prefers it slightly dry, hates onions, beets, garlic scapes, bitter melon, and the smell of fish makes her gag. These are my personal insights, rarely shared. Even if she encounters food she dislikes, she'll calmly force herself to eat it. She loves watching cartoons, especially Doraemon. Loves Doraemon because she envies Nobita. Likes Optimus Prime and Iron Man because she desires strength. Lily complained to me about how tiring it was shopping with Wendy, but I knew she was delighted. Her coming home made something unexpected happen. Felix bizarrely started seeking me out every day to chat, or even call/video. It was absurd. I suspected he was observing me, but I let it slide. As long as he's good to her, I'll let them be. But I was disappointed. One night, a call woke me up. I saw it was Felix. He said Linda tried to run Lily over, but swerved at the last second. Wendy wanted to help Linda in court, and he couldn't oppose his mom. Felix, you're crazy. No, you're all crazy. I suggested you check into a mental institution, and I was right. I couldn't help but swear, fear gripping me. How could I let someone I protected for so long suffer such humiliation? I called Lily, and she asked why I wasn't asleep despite it being late here. I could tell she was trying to hide it from me. I called my parents. Felix asked me not to tell Lily he came to me. I mocked him. What difference does it make if I tell? I clutched my phone sleeplessly, waiting for her to wake up in my time zone before calling. I wanted to go back, but she refused. She finally emphasized, "David, believe I can handle it. You've been supporting me since we met. And now you're always there to back me up. You have your own life, can't keep pausing for me. I want wealth and power to be closer to you, not hold you back." For once, she was so direct in expressing her affection towards me when she was sober. I was overjoyed yet melancholic. When Lily and I got married, only Felix from the family attended. Felix said Mike, Wendy, and Nolan were held up abroad, but really Lily simply didn't invite them. Felix was invited not as her brother, but as the company's president. Though Lily now holds the largest shares, she's more like a hands-off boss. Mike and Wendy recorded a video blessing us, played at the wedding. Lily said if it wasn't to stop people from gossiping about the wedding, she wouldn't even bother showing it. I patted her hand. At the wedding, my mom was genuinely joyful, even happily greeting folks she usually avoids. Grandma and Grandpa couldn't hide their glee, flashing their newly fitted dentures. Later, I transferred $5.2 million to Lily. She looked at me puzzled, and I hugged her, asking, "Remember the lottery amount?" $33.44 million. I was about to speak when she interrupted. 33. For 45, 20, Lily loves David forever and ever. Eyes wide, I retorted, "It means David loves Lily forever." "David, aren't you too old to still do that middle school number confession thing? And by the way, whose money is it?" She looked at me with laughter in her eyes. That was my lottery win. Married life was peaceful and happy, with little surprises thrown in sometimes. Just that my dad and I clashed more often. He said my wife stole away his wife, and I argued that his wife took away mine. Eventually, Lily and I had a daughter. The little one looks a lot like her, and clings to her just as much. I snapped a picture of the mother and daughter playing blocks and shared it online. Good morning, good afternoon, good night. Wishing peace year after year. Felix's epilogue. Felix walked into his home, and immediately felt the weight of two pairs of eyes on him. With a sigh, he started showing the photos and videos he took at Lily's wedding. Lily was beaming on the screen, while Wendy eyed the images with tears in her eyes. Without a word, Felix glanced at his mom, then retreated to his room. The peace at home crumbled into chaos when a DNA test hit them like a brick. After the results came in, Felix's dad had him look into things. It turns out David was behind that DNA test. Mike was puzzled. Usually, they stayed clear of each other's business. Felix couldn't wrap his head around it. The sister he'd cherished for 17 years wasn't his biological sister. But when Linda came to him, all sweet and calling him big brother, he simply patted her head, letting it go. Sister or not by blood, she'd still be his to care for. Wendy was too impatient. She got an address and was set on meeting their biological daughter. Felix wanted to see his biological sister, especially after hearing she had a burn injury. But a work trip abroad got in the way. Mike shared the news with Nolan and Linda. Nolan was particularly shaken. Linda was tearful and asked Mom, "Dad, if I'm not your real daughter, will you still want me?" Felix couldn't shake the feeling that Linda knew more than she let on. Mom promised Linda they'd always treat her the same. She assured Linda that Lily, their biological daughter, seemed sweet and would get along. Felix thought back on what he'd found. Lily had endured abuse from foster parents. Her life only improved when she somehow connected with David. At 15, they even considered marrying her off for a dowry to the next village. Felix was baffled. Why didn't her connection with David put a stop to her suffering? Linda suggested throwing a welcome party for Lily, thinking it was a great idea. But the plan was a bust. That sweet girl Wendy described knocked everyone off their feet the first day. Felix observed the chaos and couldn't hold back. "You're being too much." The rooms were soundproof so long as the doors were shut tight. No room for eavesdropping. "What are you gonna do about what Lily said today?" Felix lingered outside, unsure if he should walk in. Mike sighed. "How can you sever blood ties for $20,000? Blood and family reputation can't be traded that way. That kid seems vulnerable, but actually knows how to play her cards. She's nothing like a 17-year-old. Thinking about Lily's story, Mike sipped his tea, forehead creased. What about Linda? We planned she'd stay with us. She's been our child for years. We can't just cut ties. Wendy couldn't hold back her criticism. The kid wasn't raised under our roof. She seemed so well behaved at the hospital. Who knew she'd be such a troublemaker? Don't say such things, Mike replied sharply. Wendy stared incredulously at him. What kind of tone is that? Where am I wrong? Look at today. Everything went sideways. How can Lily, Linda, and Nolan coexist after this? What am I supposed to do as a mother? Mike massaged his temples. Lily's had a hard life. As her parents, we need to be more understanding of her temper. We can be patient, but she's almost 18. Out in the real world, who will cater to her whims? Linda wanted to welcome her, but Lily flipped the whole party upside down. She doesn't seem willing to get along with Linda, and she's got issues with Nolan as well. My only hope is that bringing her back will help her become half as filial and kind as Linda. Mike kept quiet. Wendy, frustrated, looked at him. Why aren't you saying anything? We have to bring Lily home, but we also need to figure out what to do about Linda. Felix knocked on the door and walked in, catching both their attention. Felix, what do you think about all this? Felix paused, realizing his dad had tossed the issue to him. After thinking it over, didn't you guys set aside a villa for Linda? It's renovated and not far away. She can live there for now, so we can bring Lily home and work on getting her to accept Linda. Linda's never lived away from home. I wouldn't feel comfortable with that, Wendy objected. Felix saw the concern in his mom's eyes and remembered his dad's question to Lily. In your eyes, are we bound to be unfair? Felix almost laughed, realizing that even they couldn't treat them the same. Mom, if not this, are you thinking of giving Lily $20,000 and cutting ties? Of course not, Wendy quickly retorted. They're both my daughters like the back and palm of my hand. And that foster mom slapping Lily in public? Felix didn't need to say more. He knew Lily hadn't had it easy. In the end, Mike and Wendy took Felix's suggestion. Mike asked him to stay behind. You handle Linda's relocation. If she resists, remind her about the family. Whether it's the blood connection or whatever David is up to, Lily needs to come home. And send the housekeeper there. She's familiar and can take care of Linda daily. At least she'll adjust and we'll be at ease. Mike sighed. I'll go fetch Lily tomorrow. Let's hope things get better. Your mom's had things her way for years. Lily's attitude might not sit well with her. Lily's her daughter. Mom's heart will soften for her. I know your mom's personality like the back of my hand. She cares a lot about face, was spoiled since she was young, and gets empathetic easily. Plus, she's kinda gullible. Mike sighed and rubbed his temples, hoping things would get better with time. We barely got a few peaceful days after bringing her back. Linda got hurt, and Felix tagged along, because he was worried his brother's temper might cause trouble. Seeing Linda all bruised up, Felix felt shocked and angry. After all those years of caring for his sister, Felix managed to stay rational, keeping his anger and Nolan's impulses in check. Once Linda was settled in the hospital, while watching over her, Felix found himself wondering how Lily had been coping all those years. He didn't dare dwell on it further, nor did he have the courage to face Linda. When Linda texted him, asking why he hadn't visited, Felix simply replied he was busy and would drop by when he had time. The next day, his dad brought up a thought. Felix, seeing Linda's injuries reminded me of how Lily must have looked with her bruises after all those years with the foster family. I couldn't help but compare. Linda has had it good all these years with us. Felix stayed silent, realizing he wasn't the only one feeling this way. Then Mike suddenly asked, "What do you think of Linda as a person?" Felix pondered and replied, "Linda was a little spoiled as a kid, but she matured, showing respect to her parents and being friendly with her classmates." Mike let out a sarcastic chuckle at the part about classmates, making Felix suspect his dad was hiding something. Felix rushed home upon hearing about that afternoon's events. At home, Wendy was weeping, her eyes swollen red, while Mike was in the study, scolding Nolan. Feeling a bit helpless, Felix said, "Mom, you always insisted you wouldn't favor one daughter over the other. So why didn't you take Lily's words to heart?" "I didn't play favorites. I wanted to make her feel welcome. Went so far as to ask David for information, and crafted a room to her liking. Wendy defended. Lily said it was fine to bring her back. I just felt awful seeing Linda hurt, thinking it'd be easier to care for her at home. Felix was exasperated. His mom just wanted her biological daughter, yet her actions pushed Lily further away. That day, Nolan ended up drinking at a bar. Drunk, he questioned, "Brother, you guys taught me since we were kids to protect my sister. And now you're saying Linda isn't my sister. Didn't you say 17 years of family ties can't be broken? So why abandon her? Why treat me this way?" Felix, looking displeased, took him back to his apartment. There was no point in scolding a drunk. Nolan went from laughing to crying, ending up repeatedly mumbling apologies. Felix saw Wendy cry, saw Nolan cry. Yet, the person who probably felt the most wronged hadn't shed a tear. Every day, Lily went about her routines with a smile, almost like she was glad they weren't happy. Felix picked a day to wait for Lily outside their house, wanting things not to get worse between them. David mentioned she liked money, so Felix figured he could use that to please her. This actually worked. But when Lily asked him why he hadn't visited Linda, Felix sighed internally. Of course she still cared. Things barely got better after bringing her back, and now they were worse than ever. Fortunately, there was still something that touched her hard enough to make her stay. Whenever Felix went on business trips, he'd buy local specialties. After 17 years, he couldn't completely ignore Linda. He considered both of them as sisters, so he tried to stay fair. Knowing Lily and Linda didn't get along, he'd deliberately buy different stuff. But things spiraled out of control after that. When Wendy said she was going to get a lawyer for Linda, Felix wasn't surprised. However, he was taken aback when Wendy said, "You guys can't help with Lily's lawyer." For the first time in his life, Felix loudly questioned Wendy. "Why, Mom? Linda's harboring thoughts of murder, and you're backing her? You always said they're both your daughters. What do you think you're doing now?" Even Nolan stared at her in disbelief. Wendy looked at them and said, "Look at you both. Do you still consider Linda family?" Felix shot back. "What does family have to do with her breaking the law? I know. Lily has solid evidence, and even with a basic lawyer, Linda will get convicted. She won't lose. But Lily hates Linda so much she wouldn't let her off easy. I can't have Linda wasting her youth in prison." Mike disapproved. "What kind of logic is that?" Wendy trembled. "I can never refuse Linda when she cries. 17 years I doted on her, poured my heart into caring for her. She told me, I'm all she has left." Wendy couldn't stop crying, unsure if it was guilt over Linda or Lily. In the end, Wendy murmured, "I lost Lily long ago. Anytime I see her, I can't help but remember her scars and the hardships she endured. She just wouldn't soften her stance, wouldn't accept me, and would provoke me without realizing it. I couldn't correct her mistakes like a mother should. I couldn't enjoy having my children around like I used to. I'm nearly going crazy with guilt. Lily already hates me, and I don't mind if she hates me a little more. It seems we're just not meant to have that mother-daughter bond. Linda became more extreme because of us, and helping her this time is the last bit of motherly duty I can offer. From now on, she's no longer our daughter. You're not allowed to visit her in prison, and when she gets out, don't contact or help her." Felix was silent. He was about to leave when Wendy stopped him. "Felix, especially you. Unless you no longer consider me your mom." Felix turned, glaring at his mother. He finally said, "Do you really want this?" He left and contacted David. On the other end, David started swearing, and Felix heard more curse words than he had in his entire 26 years combined. When Felix heard that Lily was back home, he was shocked. He only understood after learning that his parents had transferred the shares. Wendy gave all her shares to Lily and somehow couldn't face her, so she left the country. Lily returned during the second semester of her senior year. Wendy was much quieter and hardly spoke in front of Lily. She had decided to give up on Lily, hoping to free herself from this emotional turmoil. But she couldn't let go as decisively as Lily did. Even as a mother, Felix wanted to say that she reaped what she sowed. When Lily became an adult, she moved out entirely. Wendy often sat in her room, spending whole afternoons there. In the days that followed, she dared not disturb Lily and could only look at her life through her social media posts. College, engagement, graduation, marriage, having kids. It was Wendy's choice to give up being part of Lily's future. Yet she's the one who couldn't let it go. Her health deteriorated as the unresolved emotions took their toll. But the only one who could help wouldn't come. Nolan transferred all his shares to Lily. He worked hard and donated most of his salary to the Child Protection Association every year. Meanwhile, Mike busied himself with gardening, playing chess and fishing, while also nagging Felix to have kids and Nolan to find a partner. Whenever the flowers bloomed, Mike would clip a bunch, arrange them nicely, and send them to Lily's home. Every day around school pickup time, he would walk by his granddaughter's kindergarten and watch from afar. Felix checked David's latest social media post. Lily was with her daughter, both of them smiling joyfully. The little one was incredibly cute. Lily didn't want to extend her grudges to her child, and sometimes she'd even call him uncle. But the child was perceptive and rarely showed Wendy and Nolan a pleasant face. Felix ruffled her hair, watching as the mother and daughter held hands and walked away. If he could, Felix would rather hear Lily call him brother.